In this lesson, we'll explore the use of the Melt modifier. Alright, so here we've got just a couple of pieces of geometry, and let's say we want to kind of simulate the look of these melting away. So what we can do is add a Melt modifier. So you can see I've added one here. You'll find this in the modifier list here under Melt. Okay, and if we look under here, we've got the gizmo, okay, which we can move around, and we've also got the center. If we have the Melt selected, we've got the Melt parameter, the amount, and then the spread, and then we've got parameters for the solidity and the axis to melt. Let's take a look here at the melt amount. That's basically the amount of melt we've got here, pretty self-explanatory. We've also got the percentage of melt under the spread, so you can see as I increase that amount, it's kind of spreading that melting effect out. Okay, as I decrease that amount, kind of pulling that back in. Okay. We've also got options for the amount of solidity that the different objects have. So right now we've got it set to ice. So you can see it's kind of bowed up at the top, so the sides are kind of melting down a bit faster. Okay, and you can see the value here, it's set at a solidity of 2. Okay, you can change that to glass, and that gives it a much more solid amount. Okay, you can see that that's set to 12. Okay, if we look at this guy, and let's set this to jelly, and you can see that the solidity amount is set way down to 0.4, so it's less than half, half of 1. So now if we change this melt amount, you can see that this gives it a much softer look. And in fact, for any of these lower amounts, you can see that the center is melting away kind of faster, and you can kind of see that right in here on the gizmo. You can see that the center itself is kind of melting away faster than the rest, whereas in this case, the edges would melt first, leaving the center to melt last. Okay, so that's one of the differences here with the amount of solidity. We've also got plastic, which is a little bit more solid, you see, than the jelly, almost twice as solid, but still under 1. So you still get that kind of dip. You can see how that melts away. By the way, you can animate these parameters as well. But it's interesting, it kind of tries to keep the volume here, and it kind of spreads itself out. And so you can just keep going there. All right. You can also put a custom number in here, so this gives you an idea of the solidity numbers and gives you kind of a reference. So 12 would be very, very solid for the glass, and then you've got down to 0.4 for the jelly, which is not solid at all. So if we make a custom solidity amount, we can change that down to 0.2. Okay, and that gives you something very less solid than the jelly even. Okay. And then you can make that to something like 20 if you wanted something extremely solid and just kind of melting away from the sides, leaving that center. Okay, so you can use the presets here, and you can also add custom solidity amounts into the box here. We can also melt across different axes. So right now we're melting down from the z-axis. You can see that. If we change this axis, you can see we're now melting down to that way, to that direction. Okay. You can see we're now melting on the x-axis. So you can change that as well, just depending on what you need. Okay, kind of get that in there. It's kind of neat to be able to use this also for kind of a bouncing effect, so you can see, or if you've got something that's kind of a big, I don't know, trampoline, or a big something inflated that someone's bouncing off of, you can kind of get that same effect in here where the volume's getting larger, and you can see it's dipping down in the center. You can animate that, something bouncing along there, so you can get some really neat effects. We can also flip the axis and melt that from the bottom up if we want to do that. So you've got those options there. And so if you need to kind of animate something melting a little bit, or just kind of take something that you've modeled and actually add a little bit of detail in here, there's something that looks like it's kind of melted down, or the gravity's kind of sagging that down, the Melt modifier could be a good option for you. So check that out.